Okay, where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is here, everyone. Welcome back for more SPTV, where every day is a great day not to be in a cult. Guys, I don't know who messed up. You know, I want to say that Danny Masterson's team has done messed up, but the fact is, what is happening on Danny Masterson's appeal is not a mistake. So I can't say they've done messed up. It's a deliberate strategy. It is a tactic to delay. Now, in Scientology litigation, delay makes sense. L. Ron Hubbard says that is your go-to strategy. Delay. When you're talking about filing an appeal for a criminal matter, the delay tactic doesn't make any sense unless you understand the connection to Scientology. So Danny Masterson's criminal conviction, although it involved acts committed against Scientologists, and although Scientology was involved in obstruction of justice and witness tampering and all that kind of stuff, and Scientology policies and practices and procedures and beliefs very much had a lot of relevance to the proceedings of the Danny Masterson trial. It wasn't Scientology that was on trial. It was Danny Masterson. However, Danny Masterson and David Miscavige and Scientology are co-defendants in a lawsuit that was brought by Danny Masterson's victims, not for the crimes Danny Masterson committed against these victims that he was on trial for, but for the harassment, stalking, fair game that the victims have been subjected to since coming forward and since the case was reopened. Because remember, Jane Doe 1 had an open case, criminal case or criminal investigation, a case against Danny Masterson back in 2004. That case was reopened in 2017 after the police became aware of other victims in 2016. I hope I have these dates right. I always run the risk of getting them slightly wrong. So the lawsuit is based on the harassment that started in 2016. Okay, so here's what's going on. You have all of the discovery in the criminal case that does actually overlap with the civil lawsuit, meaning the criminal discovery, the discovery and the investigations, the evidence and the investigations that were involved in the criminal case have a bunch of evidence that is relevant to and overlaps with the lawsuit. Because there's a lot of information there pertaining to the investigations that were being done by the police into this case, which also included investigating these complaints of harassment. Because these are, the police are investigating these things. The lawsuit for all this stuff comes later. Scientology does not want the Jane Does, Danny Masterson's victims, to have access to this information, but Scientology already has access to it. Because you guys who've been paying attention to this for a while will recall that Danny Masterson's criminal defense team got busted for illegally, against the orders of the court, sharing the discovery files with Scientology's civil defense team. Scientology's civil defense team has been colluding and conspiring with Danny Masterson's criminal defense team. And obviously, Danny Masterson's civil defense team is obviously working with Scientology's civil defense team. And so Scientology has been able to see all along all this information and has been able to assess who are the people that have been helping the Jane Does and cooperating with the authorities and seem to be friendly and cooperative to the Jane Does. And Scientology has had all of this time to figure out how to either dig up dirt on these people or, theoretically, how to set these people up so you can get dirt on them. Or in some cases where Scientology might see which police officers seem to be cooperating and friendly and working with the Jane Does. You guys know Scientology has a system of legal bribery that they use to get police officers on their side. In fact, and I'm going to refer to my notes on this because I have this from some special inside sources. Los Angeles police, LAPD officers who take these jobs from Scientology have a word. They have a phrase for that kind of work. I know it's here in my notes. Anyway, it's something like how I'm going to buy my boat fund. Just some cute little legal bribery from Scientology. So the reason 16 months have gone by, Danny Masterson rotting in prison, and has not even yet successfully filed his appeal in a way that the court will accept, isn't because Danny Masterson doesn't want to be a free man, but it's because he is still a Scientologist in good standing. And he still has to do what David Miscavige tells him to do. And so, okay, so the actual updates on this thing, you will see if you go to the website of one of his attorneys, Cliff Gardner, you will see that it says statement regarding January 15th, 2025 brief in Danny Masterson case. And there is, well, let's just read the paragraph and then we'll talk about it. The appellant's opening brief filed January 15th, 2025 demonstrates two fundamental flaws in Danny Masterson's convictions. One, the trial was rife with erroneous judicial rulings that skewed the jury's view of the evidence against him. And two, there was a stunning amount of exculpatory evidence, which was never presented to the jury, but the appeal represents only one part of Danny's challenge to his convictions. Danny's habeas lawyer will be following up on the opening brief with a petition for writ of habeas corpus documenting additional defects in the trial process. Stay tuned as we work towards Danny's complete exoneration, and it does link to the actual appeal brief, which I'm going to read you a portion of. Now, here's the thing. These guys filed an appeal brief that they already knew was never going to be accepted by the court. So here's what I mean. So they already had requested like at least 2 extensions to file this thing. The requirement was to file an opening brief, an opening appeal brief of 25,000 words. That was the limit. These guys come in with a brief that is 60,000 words. Okay, I'm looking at my notes here. I got a timeline here. So after a number of delays, requests for extensions that were granted, they had a deadline of December 23rd of last month. December 23rd was the deadline. On December 18th, so they filed a few days early because they knew this was going to be rejected. On December 18th, they filed 60,000 word brief. The court's like, no, thank you. We said 25,000 words. You still have 5 days to file your brief. Okay. A few days later, on the due date, literally on the due date, after 13 months, they had to prepare to file a brief that the court would actually accept. The team says, can we please have more time? Okay. A few days later, the court grants the time. They say January 22nd is your new due date. Now, guys, that was 3 days ago. Okay. All right. On January 13th, Danny Masterson's lawyers go, can we please file that 60,000 word brief? Would you guys mind? I mean, I know you already told us that we couldn't. I know we've been sitting on this for like, over 2 weeks now, but can we please just stay with that 60,000 word brief? Okay. The judge goes, no. And you'd think that the judge would be like, no. And you either file the shit I asked you to file on time or you're done. You're done, son. The judge actually gives them more time. And the new deadline is January 29th. So the good news is that's only 4 days away. Are they actually going to file this thing? Okay, but here's where it gets interesting. They put together a brief that was over 2 times longer than it was ever going to be allowed to be. And they posted it to the internet. Not only did they file it with the court, but they posted it to the internet for easy access. Because the thing is, a lot of journalists don't want to pay the money to get these big, giant briefs. You'd think journalists could get them for free, but they cannot. Well, the lawyers wanted to make sure that everybody had easy access to the giant brief that they knew was never going to be accepted and was not going to be the final brief. There's reasons, in my opinion, that they stuffed a bunch of shit into this thing that they knew was never going to be accepted and was never going to be the final version, and then not only put it in the official court record, but then put it out there on the internet. Part of that reason is they're able to say and claim a lot of things that they are not going to say or claim in their final complaint. Doing it this way allows possibly journalists, documentarians, and Scientologists to point to the claims in this bullshit brief and be like, it's an illegal document, so you know what that means. It's got to be true. I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that when I was a Scientologist, that is how I would have thought. nobody lies in a legal document. It's got to be true. Okay, what is one of the claims that Scientology is making? They're continuing to make claims and pretending to provide evidence that the Jane Does all colluded with each other. Colluded as part of some grand master plan to take down Danny Masterson. And they've provided text references to recorded phone calls and some select text messages out of context to make it seem like that is what is happening. And I wanted to put some of that into context for you guys. So here is the brief itself. And we are going to jump down to this part of it. Okay, page 28. Guys, this thing's 160 pages long. Okay, so check this out. This is very interesting. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Okay, JB, they refer to all the Jane Does by initials. JB and NT are made aware of the statute of limitations issues. Now remember, guys, statute of limitations was a problem for these cases as individuals, especially for Jane Doe 1, since she had already brought a complaint in 2004, many, many years earlier. I believe statute of limitations was not a problem for Jane Doe 3 because she had just become aware that what, as a Scientologist, she thought was not rape was in fact rape. And I think it's possible that NT may not have had statute of limitations problems. I'm a little fuzzy on that one. But in order to get around the statute of limitations problems, you had to have multiple victims, and then the statute of limitations problems weren't an issue. So what they're going to, I'm framing this so that the sentences make sense, and then I'm going to provide more information. What's being implied here is that they are colluding to come up with multiple victims. Okay, let's see this. JB and NT are made aware of the statute of limitations issues. In a March 2017 recorded phone call, JB and her mother spoke about the statute of limitations issues. JB noted that although what happened to me was a long time ago, her mother had not put two and two together, and there's a reason the statute of limitations was reopened. JB explained that collusion is how they reopened my case. And a subsequent text from JB to Detective Vargas, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. In 2019, it shows JB had been made aware of the specific requirements needed under 667.61 to bypass the statute of limitations. 66761 is the statute where multiple victims, someone being charged with crimes against multiple victims at the same time, gets rid of the statute of limitations problems. JB had been made aware of the specific requirements needed under 66761 to bypass the statute of limitations. The text message says, "Ugh, I was told that she, Jane Doe 2, and Jane Doe 3 are both out of the case. And that means 66761 is out. And therefore, statute is an issue. And my case can't go forward. Please call Jane Doe 5. Apparently, a call from you, Mueller's the DA, or both, will likely result in her being able to agree to continue on with the case." Scientology is trying to conflate the need for multiple victims with the statement Jane Doe 1 made on a recorded phone call with her mom about collusion is how they were able to reopen my case. Very clever. And I can all but promise you this argument will not be in the final filing, because they do not want the DA's office to be able to provide the rest of the context for that phone call with Jane Doe 1 and her mom. That would be very bad. Okay. So what was really happening is that Jane Doe 1's case was reopened. Again, I'm going to late 2016 or early 2017. And it was reopened under the idea that if you can prove that Scientology used collusion and obstruction to get the 2004 case against Danny shut down, then they can get the case reopened. It wasn't until later in 2017 that Deputy District Attorney Reinhold Mueller interviewed personally all of the Danny Masterson victims who had either come forward and were potentially, that Danny was going to potentially be charged with, and victims that were going to potentially be used as past bad acts witnesses. It wasn't until he personally interviewed all of them that says, we have enough evidence and credible testimony to move forward with multiple victims. And the entire prosecution strategy changed from having to prove collusion and to prove obstruction to just simply moving forward with multiple witnesses, multiple victims, and not having to prove collusion and obstruction. The phone call with Jane Doe 1 and her mother occurred before the change in prosecution strategy had occurred. And Danny's defense attorneys know this. Danny's defense attorneys know this. So they're taking these things out of context. They put them up on the internet so that, the New York Post can run with articles making it seem like evidence, exculpatory evidence that was not admitted at trial. Victims admit to collusion. It's all bullshit. Complete bullshit. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's a long filing. That's why I'm only going with this one part for this video. So we theoretically have 4 more days until we will find out what the actual Danny Masterson appeal brief is going to be that will be accepted by the court. And by the way, one of the many reasons these phone calls were even being recorded was because the Jane Does were basically being tasked with gathering as much evidence and talking to as many of the people that were involved in the rapes at that time and were witnesses, whether this is at the moment or after the fact, to witnesses to the conversations that the Jane Does had with their fellow Scientologists, with ethics officers. Like, a lot of people knew what was going on. And the effort to gather, even Danny's, Jenny Weinman was Danny's publicist. There was a recorded phone call I published. I meant to go grab that phone call for this video, but I'll do it on a later video. That's why all these things were being recorded. These pretext phone calls were being recorded because they were trying to prove collusion. And they did. They proved a lot of collusion. It just didn't end up being necessary for the prosecution of Danny Masterson. It's a higher bar. It's a much higher bar to prove collusion and obstruction than it is to just try Danny on the facts of the rapes. And so that's why the prosecution strategy shifted. Okay, let's see. Just looking at my notes. Yeah, that's it for now. Let's look at some starred comments and we'll wrap this up. CMO, aloha from Maui. Aloha, CMO. Were you in the CMO? Mark, problems of Scientology. I wonder if the money Danny was donating to Scientology was the impetus for Scientology to suppress his essay crimes for years by ethics officers. I don't know that Danny was a huge donor to Scientology, but it was definitely, I think his celebrity status certainly had a lot to do with it. And yeah. Miss Tabernac, those lawyers should all be disbarred. Old Frizz, these poor victims, when's it going to end for them? Must be something dodgy, disheartening. I remember when, after Danny was sentenced, it was generally accepted that within 12 months, not only would his appeal already have been filed, but the response would have already been issued. Meaning, if Danny's appeal is going to be rejected, everyone involved absolutely expected that the thing would be submitted and rejected within 12 months. All the discovery files would be able to be released to the Jane Does to do whatever they need to do with it for the civil lawsuit, and everything would be going on its way. October, November, December, 16 months. Appeal hasn't even been filed and accepted. Susie Q, do you think Masterson is a believer in Scientology? I do personally think that he's a believer in Scientology. I mean, like as of right now, right this second, after being in jail, I don't know. When he was a Scientologist, do I think he was a true believer? I do actually think he was a true believer. Old Frizz, why on earth does the judge keep letting them off with this nonsense? Remember, it's a different judge. So the appeals judge has no concept of what an absolute nightmare and it's a different legal team. His appellate team is not the same thing as his defense team. So it's sort of, fresh eyes on the whole thing, Okay. Eve May Karain. Honest questions. I'm wondering, does anyone know how Danny Masterson is doing in jail prison? Is he having a hard time, or is he being pampered by being famous? He was transferred to a very easy facility where they keep old and sick people, of which Danny Masterson is neither. So I think he's doing just fine. Esoterica, good to see you. It's the little things. The rich can't handle a regular prison. They're cowards in the end. Eve May Karain, oh no, I really feel sad and a bit angry by hearing this. Miss Tabernac, the Jane Doe's colluding. What about these lawyers? Projection? Very, very true. Susie Q, our legal system is ridiculous. Ruth O'Hare, so they aren't even trying to claim that he didn't do the crimes, just that he should get off on a technicality. I don't know. I think, yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I can tell you, they certainly are arguing. I mean, they certainly argued that he didn't do the crimes, but you can't just appeal by saying he didn't do the crimes. You have to kind of bring up procedural and evidentiary problems. Eve May Karain, to be a lawyer of these kinds of criminals and to look in the mirror. I know I've never been able to figure that out. Des Star, this is so wrong. Indeed, everyone. All right, guys, that is it for me for the evening. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you, as always, to everyone who watches until the very end, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe